Benvenuti a tutti, welcome everybody. This is our last day of the Palestra di Poesia, which is an event where we invite poets, translators, and readers together around poems and poetry. We are very happy to have John Poch with us today, even from a distance, because we wanted to have him here in presence, but maybe next time. And we have two other poets, Franca Mancinelli, who is the chair today, but she is a poet and a very nice and good poet, and also Pietro Federico, who is a translator and a poet. So now we are going to have a very short break because we are trying another machine which will help us with the recording. Okay. Maybe it works, maybe not. So today we shall read some poems. Obviously, I will not read poems, but the poets themselves will read poems. And I hope there will be time for a short discussion and questions. Okay, so now Franca Mancinelli will tell something about herself and about Pietro Federico, in Italian if you want, or in English.
Buon pomeriggio a tutti ragazzi, voi che siete qui e a chi ci segue da casa per tanti motivi. E, come diceva prima Alessandra, è l'ultimo incontro di Palestra di Poesia. E mi piace questo titolo di questa rassegna perché appunto ci ricorda che la poesia non si scrive soltanto con una mano, ma si scrive con tutto il corpo. E a me piace molto ricordare che la parola poetica è un gesto, come ai primordi, come alle origini dell'uomo. La parola poetica incarna un'azione e per questo non può essere al di fuori del corpo, quindi è una voce incarnata. E quello che fa il poeta è proprio dare corpo alla parola, quindi una palestra di poesia. E poi la palestra è un luogo dove si va in qualche modo anche per stare bene, per liberare delle energie, delle endorfine, quindi mi piace proprio pensare alla poesia con questo titolo. Dicevo che sarà un incontro di poeti e traduttori, perché Pietro, che arriverà, ha tradotto John Poch in questo libro che si intitola Cantiamo, prendiamo il coltello, che è uscito per l'editore Ensemble di Roma nel 2022, e a sua volta John Poch sta traducendo questo libro di Pietro che si intitola La maggioranza delle stelle, uscito sempre per lo stesso editore di Roma nel 2020. E John sta lavorando proprio in questi mesi alla traduzione e il libro dovrebbe uscire negli Stati Uniti a settembre, questo settembre. Quindi è un incontro allo specchio in qualche modo. Io introdurrò soltanto brevemente i due autori e poi dialogheranno tra loro. E vedete che ci sono due copertine anche molto simili, perché c'è un progetto editoriale di cui poi magari ci parlerà Pietro, che è quello di una collana di poesia dedicata ai poeti americani contemporanei. Quindi di portare in Italia almeno 4-5 voci all'anno della poesia americana. E poi John e Pietro hanno in comune, diciamo, l'amore per la terra, per il paese l'uno dell'altro. John è molto legato all'Italia, ha viaggiato in Italia più volte e il suo desiderio sarebbe anche quello il prossimo anno di passare un anno in Italia come docente. Lui infatti è un docente universitario di scrittura creativa in Texas. E A sua volta, per Pietro, gli Stati Uniti è una terra elettiva per ragioni personali, perché ha vissuto negli Stati Uniti, ha avuto una moglie americana e quindi ha questo legame forte con questa terra. E poi un'altra cosa che li unisce è la dimensione della fede. Ognuno ovviamente a suo modo, però sentirete nei testi, che sentirete sia in lingua originale che in traduzione italiana, anche questa fede vissuta attraverso la poesia, ognuno appunto in una sua strada, in una sua dimensione. E appunto il titolo di questo incontro, Il canto, il coltello, le costellazioni, un titolo molto poetico, non so se l'ha pensato Alessandra, comunque complimenti, vedete che anche questa allitterazione, canto,
insieme a Pietro.
Insieme a Pietro avete fatto una creazione poetica, canto, coltello, costellazioni. È un titolo che risplende in qualche modo, che a sua volta apre degli orizzonti di senso e, come immaginate, come vi ho già anticipato, raccoglie in sé i titoli di questi due libri, perché il sottotitolo del libro di Pietro è Canto americano, il canto, il coltello e le costellazioni. Vorrei che il più possibile sia un'esperienza per voi di poesia, quindi di ascolto, di percezione della poesia, piuttosto che dirvi prima introduzioni critiche. Vorrei, ecco, che ascoltaste, che conosceste questa poesia. Questo libro è un'antologia che raccoglie più libri di John, composto di 8 sezioni. Parte dai libri più recenti, che sono del 2019, fino al 2008, che è un libro che si intitola Due che lottano con il coltello, e poi nelle ultime 2 sezioni ha invece degli inediti. Sono sia poesie giovanili non pubblicate in volume che poesie inedite recenti, l'ultima sezione dedicata all'Italia in particolare. Una delle ultime cose che vi volevo dire sul libro è che questo titolo viene da una poesia, l'ultimo verso di una poesia. Ecco, sentite che evoca un gesto. Cantiamo, prendiamo il coltello, un gesto rituale e un gesto che sancisce in qualche modo qualcosa di importante. Poi c'è questo noi, questa voce plurale. Sì. Il titolo è Cantiamo, prendiamo il coltello, che non è un titolo che viene da John, perché non è un titolo di un suo libro, ma l'ha dato il traduttore prendendo l'ultimo verso di una poesia. Vedete, questo titolo può evocare anche qualcosa di epico, cantiamo, prendiamo il coltello, qualcosa. E se poi leggiamo la poesia da cui è tratto, Compleanno, e vi leggo gli ultimi versi, capite che in realtà è una scena in qualche modo privata, intima, che però ha questa risonanza corale. So che il nuovo anno è solo una svolta in più verso la morte. Oh vita, arrivano la mia torta e il fuoco delle candele. Cantiamo, prendiamo il coltello. Sentirete che è una poesia che nomina in modo definito le cose. È una poesia per cui sono importanti gli oggetti e il paesaggio. Sono paesaggi soprattutto naturali. Nella prima parte del libro è il suo Texas, e i suoi paesaggi, invece, come vi anticipavo, nell'ultima parte c'è l'Italia, quindi i viaggi anche che lui fa. Alcune poesie sono anche quasi dei reportage poetici o delle cartoline di viaggio. John ha scelto per noi alcuni testi. John, can you read the poems that you choose for us?
Okay, I can read one poem at a time, and then Pietro can translate. He can read his translation, perhaps. Well, let's start with invasive species, specie invasiva. Some days are better than others. Yesterday, from a helicopter, I slaughtered with an AR-15 a couple dozen wild pigs for miles along a desiccated river. Nowhere to hide, they fell like dull dominoes on the limestone bed and dust, with little puffs of exhaust where the lead goes through. Biggest bore, tired of the metal god of constant thunder above, tired of his own old fat and heaving tusks that he would have loved to sharpen on my thigh bones. He tried to hide below a thin mesquite he considered a tree of life. We chuckled as righteous God must have at modest Adam in his sin. Where are you? We lit up his little Eden with the angel of death. They tell me any wild pig over a year old tastes rancid no matter how you cook it, ham or loin or meaty shoulder. Some say it tastes like human flesh, but who would know? You couldn't hear the laughter over the roars of all our hovering power poured out. I admit we paid a lot to get those kicks and free beer at the cabin after, watching the sunset. Later, someone by the fire asked a question. What is the glory of God?
Alcuni giorni sono migliori di altri. Ieri da un elicottero ho massacrato con un AR-15, un AR-15, un paio di dozzine di cinghiali, per miglia lungo un fiume in secca. Nessun posto dove nascondersi. Caddero inerti come domino, sul letto di calcare e nella polvere con piccoli sbuffi, di sfiato dove li trapassava il piombo. Il cinghiale più grande, stanco del dio di metallo, del tuono costante sopra di lui, stanco delle sue vecchie zanne grosse e pesanti, che gli sarebbe piaciuto affilare sul mio femore, ha cercato di nascondersi sotto. Un alberello di bacche in cui credeva come a un albero della vita. Ridacchiamo di lui come infallibile Dio deve avere riso del vergognoso Adamo dopo che aveva peccato. Dove sei? Abbiamo fatto esplodere il suo piccolo Eden con l'angelo della morte. Mi dicono che qualsiasi maiale selvatico di più di un anno ha un sapore rancido, non importa come lo cucini. Prosciutto longo o spalla carnosa. Alcuni dicono che sappia di carne umana, ma non ne ho idea. Non saresti riuscito a sentire le risate sopra i ruggiti di tutto il nostro potere aleggiante nell'aria e riversato su di loro. Ammetto che abbiamo pagato molto per avere quei tiri di coca e birra gratis alla capanna dopo, mentre guardavamo il tramonto. Più tardi, mentre eravamo intorno al fuoco, qualcuno ha fatto una domanda. Cos'è la gloria di Dio?
Prossimo. Shrike. Poetry clutches the dead branch of a predatory bird with furs, or prey on the lookout. This is a story of listening, as dry thorns in a thicket might wait beyond their own death for another flesh. And this is a song that fixes quiet, a song of earth below and wind across the cactus spine, compelling the locust to shine. Who pins the barbed beetle on barbed wire like an icon honoring Saint Hunger? Poetry is found singly, less buoyant than imagined.
La verla o uccello impalatore. La poesia stringe il ramo morto e sceglie l'uccello predatore, o la preda in sentinella. Questa è una storia di ascolto, dato che i rovi secchi nella boscaglia, benché già morti, potrebbero essere in attesa della carne di altri. E questo è un canto che ripara il silenzio, un canto dalla terra di sotto e dal vento che percorre le spine del cactus, che costringe la locusta impalata a risplendere. Inchioda lo scarabeo spinato sul filo spinato a mo' di icona, appesa in onore di una fame santa. La poesia la trovi in solitudine, vola più bassa di quanto immagini.
Ginsberg, Howl, What are your relations with the past American poetry, the Beat Generation poetry, or Whitman, or other poets? Just maybe this is a question for the end of the talk, but I would like to know that, because some of the older poets resonate in your verses, but you have a very personal tone, a very personal register, and I like your style. And the Song of Earth. The earth is so important today, much more than it was in the past, even though Whitman, for example, praised the earth, praised America, praised the land, but now it has a different meaning. So I don't want to disturb you any longer, but just to make this question. But you can also answer later.
No, I can say one thing right now, and maybe Pietro can translate. I think my influences vary. They go all the way back to the Bible, to Dante, to Homer. But as far as American influences, it begins, I think, with Emily Dickinson and Walt Whitman. And those two poets being so very different. And then jumping forward to the modern poets like T.S. Eliot, Hart Crane, William Carlos Williams, Robert Frost, Wallace Stevens, a very rich time in American poetry. And then I would say, for me, the beat poets are not formal enough for my taste. I'm more interested in poets like Sylvia Plath and Robert Lowell from that time period.
And Odin man also too, maybe? Odin, Wisdom you Odin?
Oh, and and earlier, in between, say, the modern and the contemporary, W.H. Auden, for sure, and especially because of his formal work, but his spiritual connection. So, and speaking of the poet of the land, poems of the land, of the earth, I think both Pietro and I share this interest in the land, in the body, in having poems that not only are spiritual, but they're spiritual located through the body. Okay, should we read another one? Migration?
Thank you.
Are you hiding in a book? I want to read it. Like Peter de Hook's love of the half-open shutter, you sip your glass of water in the shadow of your bangs, in the shadow of your book, a judgment against the fact that every decade is arrogant. You are so clean you daydream of sheets, telling no one. Your hands are two magic birds, one for granting great geographical knowledge and one for plunging in and out of streams to stymie your enemies. If these wings come together in the form of prayer, a nest, or a cup of air, certain houses and neighborhoods will explode. Let them come together in the small of my back.
Migrazione. Ti stai nascondendo in un libro? Voglio leggerlo. Come l'amore di Peter de Hook per gli scuri socchiusi, sorseggi il tuo bicchiere d'acqua all'ombra della tua franda, all'ombra del tuo libro, una sentenza contro l'arroganza di ciascun decennio. Sei così pulita che a occhi aperti sogni le lenzuola, senza dirlo a nessuno. Le tue mani sono due uccelli magici. Uno per garantire grande conoscenza geografica e uno per tuffarsi ed emergere dalle correnti, per confondere i tuoi nemici, se queste ali si uniranno, sotto forma di preghiera, di nido, di una tazza d'aria. Certe case e quartieri esploderanno. lascia che si uniscano alla base della mia schiena.
So this is a love poem, and I know Pietro writes love poems. Do Italian poets write love poems these days?
Of course, man. You're Italian. What are you asking?
Okay. It's not something that happens in American poetry very much. I don't know if that's any interest. I think people are afraid to write the love poem because they think it might seem too vulnerable or too emotional.
Okay.
Do you need to translate that, Pietro?
No, they understand everything.
Okay. Yeah, it's a
why do you think so? Why do you think so? Why is vulnerability so feared?
I don't know the psychology. I don't know why people are afraid. I think most poetry in America now seems to be a lot of poetry seems to be sarcastic, and it's like a defense mechanism against love to be sarcastic. And so that's something I'm very guarded against.
And what about politics, man? You often talk about this, like politics used wrong in poetry. That could be interesting subject to go on.
Okay, I think it's a problem, but it's not, you can do it, and I think you can do it well, but it is a big problem. William Butler Yeats said that of our quarrel with others, we make rhetoric, and of our quarrels with ourselves, we make poetry. And I think a lot of the political poems in America now are not a quarrel with the self. It's a quarrel with others, or it's a quarrel with institutions. But it's not a place of imagination, a place of discovery. And so I think it becomes just merely rhetoric rather than poetry. No one's discovering anything. They already know what the answer is. And to me, that is very dangerous. It becomes propaganda at its worst.
Mm-hmm.
A questo proposito volevo fare una domanda a Pietro, appunto in questa avventura della lingua poetica, qual è stata la difficoltà più grande che hai incontrato nella traduzione della lingua di John, e che cosa ha portato nella tua lingua di poeta, se hai sentito dei cambiamenti, insomma degli nutrimenti da questa esperienza di traduzione, e come è stato il lavoro con un autore contemporaneo vivente con cui quindi si può dialogare quotidianamente e confrontarsi, ma anche essere influenzati nelle scelte. Quindi com'è stato questo equilibrio tra le tue scelte, la tua poetica, il tuo lavoro di traduttore e allo stesso tempo il rapporto con John, che è anche di amicizia profonda?
Okay, so the first thing I would like to say, guys, is like that I am a poet, and I know that's what I was saying to Franca yesterday. It's like I'm a translator, of course, but I translate from a place of being a poet, right? Which is different. It's not. I'm not super technical. I try to get to the core of the vision first of all, and then like to develop the style of translation from there. And I don't know, it's something that I do because it's something that the reason why I translate is mainly because, like Franca was asking, it's like it has to do with my poetry, right? It's like a chance for me, an opportunity to develop my own writing. And for me, it was also like I always say that translating is reading twice, like twice deeper. So. The hardest part was first of all is that this is kind of like a paradox in a way, but I'm much less technical in a way than John. And being me Italian, that must sound strange, but I love Dante, of course, like as he does. But can you see me, guys? No, but it doesn't matter. as long as you hear me. But it's way more technical. It's way more rooted in technique. So what I had to try to do is, in a way, was to force myself to get to this place of a technicality that is, of course, is much better. It is a much better poet than me for sure, and it's also much more experienced. But the point is that he really managed to merge form and substance, and especially like the relationship between reality and language for him is very tight. And so for me, it was very hard to embody that into the sound and especially into the rhythm. I don't know if you've noticed, but in the text that the poems that we had before, there are many enjambments, like a lot of you know what enjambment is. You know what enjambment is, right? Like, okay.
English or Italian?
No English is better. But it doesn't matter. So also, you could hear it from the way I was reading it. I will always try to end the verse while I was reading it with the enjambment. I wouldn't immediately rush to the next line, right? I try to respect the silence that John chooses very willingly and very there's a lot of intentionality there. So I try to stop, even though you don't see like a punctuation or any sign of stop, right? Because that's definitely part of the flux of the rhythm of the melody that it tries to create, even in the English text. That was something that I really tried to respect, even if it would like sometimes it resulted into forcing like slightly the Italian text. Maybe we could find some examples, but I don't want to waste too much time about that. But you will see it in the next poems that we're gonna read. Sometimes it even ends with like a no or like a conjunction sometimes or whatever. You know what I mean? I try to stay with the sound and with the rhythm much more than with the meaning. Of course, trying to trying to harmonize them together. But it doesn't always work very well. Again, I don't know. That's it. And the opportunity that was for me to interact with John while we were doing this, it was amazing because I could really learn so many things. And as an American, let's get back to the beginning of my answer, and then I'll stop. As an American, I would expect, you know what I mean? I always try to be I'm very rough as a poet. When I write my poems and my poetry, I almost tend to violence and to like a sort of very rough kind of approach to not only to language, but to reality. And it's much more delicate and it's much more, he's a dancer. He's a beautiful dancer. He dances with language. So I had to learn, and that's something that I really treasure right now. I'm treasuring right now when I'm writing my new poems. This dancing, because I don't always try to dance with language. I want to get to the point and to. Sometimes that's why I write. You will see later. Sometimes poetry my poetry tends to get close to the prose. For that reason. Okay, I'm gonna shut up. I'm sorry.
Okay, and I would like to say that I think we have so much in common beyond, say, okay, we might have a difference in style, but subject matter. Well, first of all, with style, I think both of us try to balance lyric and narrative, you know, as far as like at least having a clear scene for the narrative, right? Mm-hmm. Something doesn't have to move through a drama, but there has to be at least a clear scene in most of our poems. But also making that sing. We are interested in history, in personality, in desire, spirituality, freedom, identity, eros, beauty and nature. I feel like both you and I, Pietro, we want it all. Like,
That is totally.
we want it all. We want to get as much as we can of all these different experiences and aspects of what it is to be a human into a single poem, if we can, you know. And I don't think many poets want to do that. I don't think they have a grand vision, but I think that's definitely what I want. And I think when I read your poems, Pietro, that's what I see. I see that you want more into your poems, but with, you know, poetry, you try to do it with fewer, with less words, right?
Can you read something else, John, for us?
Okay, this is a poem that takes place on the island of Ischia. If you haven't been to Ischia, you should go to Ischia. I need to come to Urbino, but Ischia is a place where I've been 3 times, and I'm in love with. So this is called Mermaid Tears. The little boy with the plastic bucket of sea glass shows us his jewelry for sale, trying to impress my girls who must be marvelous to him. He cannot fathom the stained glass of their eyes, one girl Mediterranean blue and one a simple hazel of the island colors here, a hillside mix of stone pine green and brown volcanic soil. The little show-off might be 5, eyes alive to the occasional color in the silky lapping water, in front of Gino's deck, where we just ate the best bruschetta in the world. He rattles his little bucket, trying to get their attention, while my girls, delirious from having traveled by taxi, train, and taxi, and ferry, and taxi again on this island, my girls, one teen and one preteen, still playful girls, roll in the sandy shallows of this beach, lapping up the lapping. Yachts ignore them, and they ignore the yachts, while the bells from the church strike the metal call of 4 o'clock. The boy rattles his bucket again, and then walks off with his treasure, satisfied. And I am satisfied at being in Ischia again, my wife here floating on her back in the supreme salt water. Because it is clear this afternoon, beyond her I can see Gaeta, the white walls rising from the shore of that far city, and to the west, a mountain looms where once we suppose Odysseus lounged in excess, but finally tired and longed for home. There was no such thing as sea glass then, though the mermaids splashed along the shorelines farther north, sirens who sang a song of colored light. And he would often grow nostalgic for that time when, safely tied to a mast, he had heard the kaleidoscope of poetry and swooned like a boy, enamored of the sharpest colors of the sea, while the bones of human failure tumbled in the shallows.
Lacrime di sirena. Il bimbo con il secchiello di plastica pieno di vetri levigati dal mare. Ci mostra i suoi gioielli, vuole venderceli, cercando di colpire l'attenzione delle mie figlie, che ai suoi occhi devono apparire meravigliose. Non riesce a capacitarsi del vetro colorato dei loro occhi. In una è il blu mediterraneo e l'azzurro semplice di queste isole, nell'altra il pendio delle colline che mischia il verde del pino marittimo al bruno del suolo vulcanico. Questa piccola faccia di pronto potrebbe avere 5 anni. I suoi occhi ravvivati dal riflesso vellutato e sciabordante dell'acqua, di fronte alla barca di Gino dove abbiamo appena mangiato la bruschetta migliore del mondo. Il bimbo scuote il secchiello, cercando di attirare la loro attenzione, mentre le mie figlie, fuori di sé dall'emozione per aver viaggiato in taxi, treno, e taxi, e traghetto, e ancora taxi, una volta sull'isola, le mie figlie una teenager e l'altra più piccola. Bimbe ancora spensierate si rotolano nelle secche sabbiose, godendosi lo sciabordio del bagnasciuga. Gli yacht le ignorano e loro ignorano gli yacht, mentre le campane della chiesa fanno risuonare il richiamo metallico delle 16. Bimbo sferraglia il secchiello un'altra volta e poi se ne va con il suo tesoro. Contento, ed io sono contento di essere di nuovo a Ischia. Mia moglie è qui che fa il morto su quest'acqua indescrivibile. Dato che il pomeriggio è chiaro, guardando oltre lei posso vedere Gaeta, le pareti bianche delle case che si alzano dalla costa in lontananza, e a ovest invece incombe una montagna dove si suppone che Ulisse rimase troppo a lungo e poi finalmente fu vinto dalla nostalgia. A quel tempo al mare non capitavano vetri da levigare, benché le sirene sguardassero più a nord lungo la costa, sirene che cantavano canzoni di luce colorata. E Ulisse sentì spesso nostalgia di quella volta, in cui, legato al sicuro all'albero maestro, aveva sentito il caleidoscopio della poesia e aveva dato in smanie come un ragazzo, innamorato dei colori vivacissimi del mare, mentre le ossa dell'umano fallimento bruzzolavano nelle secche.
I just hope that, I don't know, I think sometimes we're too close to our own poems, but I think my goal in that poem is to express not only the contemporary moment with a young boy and my young daughters, but how Italy is both very fresh to me, but also has this deep history that goes back beyond Italy to Odysseus, right? And that's a huge part of why I love Italy, that we just don't have that in America. We don't have that sense of deep, deep history and mythology. We have our own mythologies, but it's not that.
We're gonna get back there later, man, because I have something to say about this, but about my book. But I would like to say this is a poem. This poem is a very good example of what you said before about the fact that you write to discover, right? Because you really don't look like you're writing it like, and you know where you're going to end up to, right?
Right,
like,
correct.
There is no way you're just venturing into writing right now, like in this poem. Right? Can you describe that? Like, this is very important, I think, for young people to hear.
I agree.
What is the process for you?
Well, when I was on Ischia with my friend Chad Davidson, an American poet, we would go out in the morning, we would go running, we would go to a museum, we would go swimming, we would go to Bar Gino and have the best bruschetta in the world. And then we would come back to the place that we were renting, and we would write poems. And I didn't know what I would write. I would just write about the experience that I just had. And then I would let language just take me wherever it went. I didn't have an agenda. And then of course, I would end up with a poem, but a very rough poem that I would work on for months, maybe, finding out where the real poem was within that first draft, and just keep trying to make the sound of it better and make the themes of it more intense, I think. Pietro, I wonder if you could jump to the end and read Kansas first, because I want to talk a little bit about sound and translation. And I was able in a revision, speaking of revision, I was able in my most recent revision of this poem to find a lot of rhymes that try to do some of the things you're doing with sound in this poem. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Kansas, Amelia Earhart. When you say my land, or when you think of your childhood, memory is a car that flashes in the darkness of time, a light almost always horizontal. In Kansas, it's even easier to see. From this house built on this bend of the Missouri, you look inland like a boxer, and the plains have you up against the ropes of the river. Thousands of square miles of wheat and sunflowers, and still I have always been hungry for that perspective of the sparrow, the hawk, and the vulture, all climbing and diving into the third dimension. By 20, you have already seen it all, because by then you have lived pure longing and all that tension, the flotsam and jetsam of every place and time. By 20, you have already seen every generation, their movement through this void of solitude, of latitude and longitude, from point A to point B. Will you make something higher? Among thousands of questions, this is the outlier, where my heart is distressed with fear, but answers yes. I want the hour when I will smile, and that pleasure will be nostalgia beyond history and its measure. You educate your heart in the spent universe of the plains, then tear it from the ground and toss it skyward against the strangulating cycle of day and night, and steel yourself to never return with all your might.
È un'aviatrice, comunque è una delle prime aviatrici donne, no? Che fece dei record mostruosi. L'ultimo cercò di circonnavigare il globo, se non sbaglio, e è arrivata quasi sulla soglia quasi arrivata sulla West Coast californiana, no, cadde nel Pacifico e non fu più ritrovata, scomparve. Ok? Se ve lo dico, avevo anche non c'è scritto anche. E lei viene dal Kansas, che è in realtà una terra che non ha bocchi sul mare, è molto continentale. Quando dite la mia terra, o pensate alla vostra infanzia, la memoria è un'automobile che spanara nel buio del tempo una luce quasi sempre orizzontale. Ed è ancora più facile in Kansas. Da questa casa, su quest'stanza, al di qua del Missouri, guardi l'entroterra come un pugile messo alle corde dalle pianure, spalle al fiume. Migliaia di miglia quadrate di grano e girasoli. Eppure ho sempre avuto fame della vista che hanno i passeri, i falchi, gli avvoltoi, alti nella terza dimensione. A 20 anni hai già visto tutto, perché hai vissuto il desiderio assoluto e la sua frustrazione, lo spizzico o il boccone di ogni tempo e luogo. A 20 anni hai già visto ogni generazione, la loro solitudine, muoversi nel vuoto di latitudine e longitudine, dal punto A al punto B. Farai qualcosa a tutta questa altezza? Tra mille domande, questa è la sola in cui il cuore mi si spezza di paura e risponde di sì. Voglio l'ora in cui sorrido e il mio sorriso sarà la nostalgia, la dismisura della storia. Educa il cuore all'universo, sfiancalo di pianura, e strappalo da terra e lancialo nell'aria di traverso al ciclo avvolgente della notte e del giorno, con tutta la forza necessaria, e sia pronto a non fare ritorno.
E tra l'altro mi turba positivamente questo dialogo che avete fra poeta e traduttore e poeta, che c'è questo rimando continuo di identità che invece di entrare in competizione si compenetrano e creano entrambi qualcosa di diverso, perché il tuo registro è diverso dal suo, il tuo stile è diverso e alla fine la sonorità è diversa, i suoni sono diversi. Per questo poi è difficile soprattutto tradurre la poesia più della prosa, anche perché la poesia è molto sonora, è molto importante saperla leggere ad alta voce. E un romanzo, bene o male, è vero che è importante l'onomatopea, il senso del suono, ma in una poesia è una percentuale altissima Quindi sono diverse le sonorità della tua poesia e della tua traduzione e viceversa.
Certo, quello che mi veniva, mentre parlavi mi veniva da pensare che in realtà la nostra e poi è una comunione che poi sfocia in John, do you need to speak English or you can yeah. Okay, so Alessandra saying that our like we translate each other and the results usually like end up like having completely different sounds, right? Like respect of what you're expecting from a literary translation, right? Something like that. Like because and it's true because we are very personal in translating, right? We are very personal translating style. È quello che vi sto dicendo.
Sì. Ma anche questo dialogo che c'è tra di voi mi piace molto.
Yeah, and the conversation, that's where that's the point. Yeah, okay, see, conversation. So she was really stricken by the conversation that we have. Like, and what I wanted to say about this conversation is that even like more than having a relationship with you, even before you is like me having a conversation with America and you having a conversation with Italy. And we basically are voices of these two lands, right? And so we managed to, I don't know. For me, first of all, it's not a human encounter. It's bigger than that. It's for me, you bring me America in a way, and I bring you Italy in response.
Yes.
So okay, so let me ask this question because this is very important. What happened? Because something happened in your language when you started writing about Italy. Like your poems are different, and your language changed. We talked about this. It's like it got brighter, it got like more even. In a way, it's even more relaxed. It's like you're chilling, man. Like, I don't know, on a beach, but like. Please explain something about that change, right?
Well, one of the things that changed for me was that I was writing poems under the influence of España, because I had been traveling to Spain, teaching study abroad classes there for probably 10 years. And I was writing about Andalusia, and under the influence of Lorca and the Duende and those kind of poems that are much darker, they're very much of the earth, but in some ways demonic. They're very religious, and yet there's something about blood and dirt and rust and decay in all those poems. And when I started coming more to Italy, I was going deeper into history, but not deeper into darker emotions. I was coming more into light. And I think I started writing poems that had more to do with praise. I mean, certainly that poem, Mermaid Tears, ends with an image of death, of bones rolling in the shallows of this beautiful ocean, but still the overwhelming presence in that poem is of my young daughters and this little boy and this bright sea glass. And so I think Italy allows me to continue to write about death and difficulty, but more praise comes out of it. And it seems to me more easy and natural in some way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but in a way, I don't agree with you on the fact that the Mermaid Tears ends with death, because I think it's like, I'm sorry, I'm getting to it, but you're going for like you're describing glory, man. There, you're just and the failure of flesh, but what you're describing is actually the glory of the song, of the poem, of the poetry, right?
Yes, because the poem lasts. I mean, we still read, Homer, the Odyssey is still with us, and that is the song continues, right? Even though there is this death of the sailor, the song continues. And of course, Odysseus doesn't die. He ties himself to the mast. He's smart enough not to go ashore with the sirens.
Yeah. So what I mean is that I think Italy is bringing you glory. Like this phrase that you say, maybe it's another word to say it, but
yes.
like the glory that maybe you were missing or looking for previously.
Yes, davvero.
Pietro, why is there so much American in your poems? Because he speaks of Iskia, but you speak of almost all,
No, all of them.
All of the United States. Every single poem is about one state of the United States. So it could be a sort of a book about American geography, culture, literature, philosophy, etc. But he's not American. So I think that an external gaze is always better than an internal one. But why this love for America?
Okay. Then I would love, John, I would love you to say something later about this. Like why? Okay, about the relationship that this book between me and America that this book tells. But okay, I'm gonna answer first. I lived in America for a couple of years, and when I moved there out of love. I was deeply in love with a woman, and then I had a baby from this relationship, and now we both live. Me and my ex-wife we live in Rome with my daughter, and it has been a very like as sometimes it happens. It's been a very beautiful first year, followed by let's say 4 or 5 years of hell, like living hell. And so we moved back to Rome while the hell was already on the move. So
you were writing poems during
I started writing I started writing for 2 or 3 poems of this book while I was still in that relationship. But then it took me to finish the book. It took me 8 years. I almost 8 years. And what I was saying is that America for me was an amazing discovery, but for all the reasons that we cannot imagine from here when we are in Italy. Because America, guys, is not what they sell you from America. Americans tell us they're amazing and beautiful and strong, and that's definitely not what I got stricken by when I was there. I fell deeply in love with this land.
Did you travel in all of these?
Not all of them. Not all of them. Just most of the South and the East Coast, but not much. Not because their relationship was already working on keeping me like not in prison, but something like that. Yeah, okay, let's say that. We have to be diplomatic in a way. But I'm not recorded. Yes, I'm recorded. But that's okay. So the point is that this pain, this very deep personal pain, helped me to have a key that usually Italians don't have when they go there, especially when they go there for vacation, right? They're vacationing, they just go to New York and see Los Angeles, these cool cities and stuff. All they do is the Route 66 or these famous, these famous sites. Like if you're lucky, you go to Yellowstone, you see these beautiful natural parks. But I was not there for that reason. So I saw the Deep South. I saw some racism.
Where did you live?
In Virginia. I lived in Virginia, in a very small town. Like, have you ever watched Gone with the Wind? The movie Gone with the Wind? Okay. You're too young. Yeah, please, but please watch it. Come on, via col vento, ragazzi, vedetelo. But anyway, I used to live in this house with like a plantation, like mansions and stuff. This house had like these white porches and horses because my ex-wife was very rich. In America they say old money. She comes from old money, like from the money that comes from the colonizers, right? Like So I used to have I had this encounter with the American culture, and then I used to meet the butcher, right? Or the whatever, like some university professor in college, or I met people in the street, and 7-Eleven now is not on anymore. So sorry for that. I miss it. Like this, like in shops and stuff.
Were you already a poet?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was.
You did not become a poet.
No. I was 30. Yeah, no. But I was. Let's say that before I was a child, and this relationship really helped me to grow. I became. Thanks to America. Yeah, thanks to America and marriage and divorce. But anyway, and also no, wait a second. Also fatherhood. That was definitely what made me become an adult. But anyway, so long story short, I really delved into this culture because not only I loved it for what it was, for real, but also because I needed to transcend this pain that this relationship was giving me, and I needed to be able to place that pain and to signify it, to give it meaning. So for me, my wife couldn't be just that pain, right? She had to be a door, a gateway into a vision, into something bigger and wider and much more vast. And so that's why I delved into this work. And this was really this was work. This was not just, okay, I'm gonna put myself, I feel the inspiration, I'm gonna write. No. This was like studying, like history and geography, and like the volume, the vastness of this land, and and like do research, like deep research. It was like writing a major in college for me. It took me 8 years for that reason. It was not an easy work.
It's a project.
It was a project, and for me now, poetry cannot. It cannot be something else than that. For me, it has to be. It must come from a vision, from a great vision, from a vision of greatness. And so Dante for me is the best. That's what the poet that I relate to the most. Okay.
I did want to say one thing about rhyming in English is very difficult compared to Romance languages, right? And so, in Kansas, Pietro is rhyming so much in this poem. He doesn't do the same kind of rhyming in every poem, but tutto assoluto, frustrazione, boccone, generazione, altezza, spezza. I mean, and so for me, it became a big challenge, right, to rhyme like tension, jetsam, solitude, longitude, higher, outlier, distressed, yes. But when I found those rhymes and I was able to keep the same sense, the same semantic sense, it just seemed like a triumph, like a marriage made in heaven. And sometimes I can't find the rhymes and I have to let it go because it's just not there. But it's magical when it is there. And there is this link between our languages and our poetic visions. That's one of the amazing things in translation that I really love, is to have a similar sonic quality. And of course, it's not the exact same lines that rhyme. Sometimes it's just in proximity. But I wanted to say that about the translation. Okay.
No, that was great.
Thank you for the readings and the commentary. It was very beautiful for me to hear. But I had a question about the first poem that you read us, Mr. Poch.
Yes.
About invasive species. That scene in which the character uses the AR-15 to kill these animals, and the obvious relationship that these animals have with their environment, which is invasive. It's also interesting. And afterwards, you spoke about the fact that around you, you see a lot of poets kind of moving away from a serious tone to kind of cover themselves with the tone of irony, not wanting to face their feelings or to even accept love as a theme in their poetry. I was wondering, in this context, what do you think of identity poetry, since you also said that your poetry and the one of your translator are connected by this theme of identity? Because I see that a lot of young poets especially are now concentrating on very subjective identity politics, and they utilize the serious tone, the non-ironic, to make it part of their activism and to affirm themselves as individuals inside of a society. But I feel that in that poem, in that first poem, the kind of identity, I don't know if you go hunting with an AR-15 from an helicopter, but I feel that in that sense, identity became a condition, a human condition, instead of being, a kind of locating yourself inside of a society. Of course, the sharp definition, the model of the gun kind of throws you inside of a context. I can imagine hunters in the United States buying military grade weapons to kill animals in the wild. But in this context, what would you say about identity and realism and embodying a condition inside the world?
That is a great question. And I think you almost answer your own question in many ways. Let me take it a little further by saying that I think that both Pietro and I seek our own identity through empathy, right? And it's not just empathy for people who share our identity, but people who are actually quite different than us. I have not hunted wild boar, cinghiale, from a helicopter. I did walk on this property in South Texas that was being overrun by wild boar. And I had a conversation with a woman who was in charge of the property, hundreds and hundreds of natural of this nature preserve. They had to do something about the pigs, and so they would hire people at first to come and kill them. And of course, the AR-15 is very efficient to do that. But then they realized they could actually make money by letting people do this more efficiently even than that from a helicopter. And so it was solving two problems at once. It was allowing people to have an adventure. And maybe killing wild boar is better than killing people with an AR-15. Yes. But then, to kind of get rid of this invasive species. But obviously the poem is talking about us as humans being an invasive species as well. The way that we, with our violence, don't quite belong in the world. And so I'm trying to understand that, I think, having an empathy for this character who wants an adventure, but also who is questioning things spiritually. And so, I think I'll come back to that, identity through empathy, right? And through a realistic, as you mentioned, realism, a realistic empathy. What do you think, Pietro?
Absolutely. That's part of conceiving poetry as a form of, again, as a form of knowledge, like of discovery. That's why we pursue empathy, or we are not content with our own lives. We are bored of ourselves, of what we already know. And so we need to get out ourselves into the world to explore it and to be the other. Like Rimbaud used to say, right? Je no, sono un altro. I'm another. That's the base of humanity, guys. I think that's why poetry is so sacred. Okay, so vision for me, this vision, using this under this connotation, like vision as an ability to see the world not through your eyes, but through the eyes of others. That's like the secret weapon of poetry for me. I talk through the eyes of the serial killer in a poem. I'm not a serial killer. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm a potential one, but I never serially killed anybody. But okay, so and I talk about from women, from a transsexual walking in a New York street, in the street of New York. Like this is why I write poetry right now. Questa ragazza è la storia di una ragazza che è morta in un incidente stradale. Chi parla è Ceres Millicent Horner. Questa era una studentessa, un super genio che a 16 anni andava a Princeton a fare l'università di fisica, di astrofisica, lei voleva fare l'astronauta. Parla del suo rapporto con le stelle e c'è l'incidente.
Pietro ha a volte questo sguardo, come avete visto con la poesia dell'aviatrice, questo sguardo che è proprio da una prospettiva immensa. In questa poesia è tra la vita e la morte, quindi è una prospettiva di una densità potente.
Allora, prima che il tempo guadagnato sbricioli all'impatto, gridi. E un secondo dopo che l'onda ti ha travolto, sei lì che ridi, provi quasi tenerezza per te stessa e poi ti accorgi che puoi vedere il tuo corpo dall'alto attraverso un fittissimo strato di anitridi. Dopo poco, nel medesimo secondo, puoi tenere gli occhi fissi sui primi soccorsi e vedere finalmente il miracolo del sole sospeso come una sfera in un buio staccato da ogni orizzonte. Sentire sulla fronte il suo vento terribile, protoni ed elettroni sfuggiti alla corona, lambire la soglia dell'esosfera. Dopo un minuto sei ai bordi del braccio di Orione, ma puoi ancora tuffarti di testa tra le spire della nostra galassia, toccarne il fondale con la guancia, puoi ancora appoggiarla sul binario o alla fiancata del vagone che dà verso il cielo. Le strisce di lamiera ti bruciano gennaio sulla faccia, anche se sei tra le braccia congelanti dello spazio stellare. Stelle e strisce nelle 4 dimensioni, come il senso finale di una strana bandiera americana. E mentre sali, tutto si immistera, senti come ogni cosa intensamente esista, buona e giusta, su misura, alla dismisura umana. Non faccio neanche in tempo a capire che si avvera quel non stare nella pelle, che mi strugge fin da quando ero bambina, un altro passo, e dovrò allungare il braccio verso il basso, negli anni, nella luce marina delle ultime stelle.
Birthday. December and the sandhill cranes are circling overhead, invisible as stealth jet planes, their harmless cries widespread on silence. They have the sense to know that south is safer, warm, behind them rolling hills of snow and next year's farm after farm. They circle and complain somewhere a mile up. You have to crane, haha, your head and stare as stretch like a giraffe. And finally you see the line the thermal draws them to, that straighter wind, the sign, invisible and blue, above this Texas college town. Adrift, they look like gnats got organized and made a frown or a smile. Their habits remain as long as cotton fields are farmed, or corn, or sorghum. At night, they hold the useless shields of their breasts, silencing their boredom, in hopes coyotes won't surprise and leave them in a heap of feathers torn, legs strewn, orange eyes, bewildered beyond sleep. Or morning, they rise from earth, away, ungainly, lucky, like me, below, surviving another birthday, a cancer scare. It strikes me. I'm loved despite my gazing toward the mirrors of my days. Forgive your selfish servant, Lord, bemoaning holidays. Though discontent and fickle, I can turn to a ballad, tropes of seasons, turning birds on high, and open my envelopes. I know the new year is just one more turn toward death. Oh, life, my cake and candle fire come. We sing, we take the knife.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Grazie per la vostra pazienza, ragazzi.
Grazie. Grazie Alessandro.
Adesso loro scriveranno commenti che io vi farò avere, e vi faremo avere a John. E quindi ringraziamo tutti quanti, John e tutti quelli che ci hanno ascoltato anche da remoto, e ci diamo appuntamento al prossimo anno accademico, speriamo di fare qualcosa. Grazie mille.
Grazie a voi, ragazzi.
Grazie.
Thank you, John. See you later.
Ciao.